Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tuned Into Tennis. I'm your host, Myles David. The last time we talked, it was Thursday, August 6th, and the U.S. Open hard court swing was still trying to find its legs, maybe like baby Bambi or something. But a week later, it's almost a completely different story. We've got an All American Masters 1000 final in Montreal. We also have a WTA number one race that's down to basically single digits. And we also have the follow up 1000 tournament in Cincinnati, Ohio, that has already tried to weather itself off of the map with a whole bunch of rain delays and weather crises even before the main draw has begun. So we're going to talk about all of that, walk through it, cover it all on today's episode of Tuned Into Tennis. We're going to have a three-set rundown about Montreal, Toronto, Cincinnati, everything in between. Just me and you, no guests today, kind of like we're sitting at a bar and I am yapping your head off. So if that's your style of podcast or style of content, then buckle up, put your earphones in, and let's get after it. Make sure you subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube. Make sure you leave a review on the podcast world or Spotify and Apple and all that stuff. So just engage with your boy so it doesn't feel like I'm talking into the ether of nothingness, okay? Because somebody has to be listening to this and watching this, right? And it's you. So I'm glad I got your ears. All right. So let's start with what I think is the major headline. And we're going to start in Montreal with the men. I like places, things, people that start with the letter M because, Miles. So we're going to start with Montreal and the men's quarterfinals because last time we spoke, there was not the quarterfinal stage. And honestly, segue or sidebar, I guess I should say, some of this is going to be out of date tennis news because it's Thursday and the women and men's final in Canada is happening as we speak. Like the women are competing and the men are shortly after that in Montreal. This is going to go out after that. So just take it with a grain of salt. We're going to talk about it as if you had never heard any of this happening before. Hopefully you haven't. And this is fresh news that I'm breaking to you. But if you have heard it, just stay for my takes on some of the things. Okay. But yeah, the schedule of events in tennis is just haywire in general, but this time of the year it's a little bit tough to follow with how they've scheduled back-to-back events leading into the US Open. Like typically things start on a Monday and end on a Sunday. First round starts on Monday, championship is on a Sunday. That's typically how things work throughout the year, but this little sector of tennis is just confusing. So if I'm a little confused, cut me some slack because the rest of the tennis world is off its axis, kind of. All right. So the headline the ATP itself put out this week was that all 8 men's quarterfinalists in Montreal were born in the 2000s. No 99s for anybody, strictly 2000s, every single one. Not a single player over 25 was left standing in the IGA Stadium in Montreal. By the way, I always think it's interesting when I see the labeling of IGA Stadium in Montreal because it reminds me of real throwback grocery stores, and I'm surprised that it's still in business every time I see it. So shout out to IGA. And we're going to talk about it before we even get to the final. We're going to run through the entire final 8 one by one because I think some of the guys, like, with them being relatively youngsters, 25 and younger, you as an average or casual fan may not have heard their name before. So hopefully by the end of this segment and podcast, you do. Let's start with somebody that I hope you do know or at least can point out in the crowd if you see them. And that's Mr. Ben Shelton, number 5 seed and defending National Bank Open champion. He won it last year when it was staged in Toronto. They alternate cities. One year they're in Toronto, one year they're in Montreal, and so on and so forth. Just for the backstory, Ben was born in October of 2002. He hasn't dropped a set all tournament through to the quarterfinals. He ended Joao Fonseca's run to reach the quarters. Then he dismantled number 13 seed Jakub Minchik, who won Miami last year. He beat Jakub Minchik 6-3, 6-1 in just 73 minutes, 18 winners to just 3 unforced errors. And he backed that up with another 6-2, 6-3 semifinal win over American Leonard Tien, fellow lefty, to reach his second straight Canadian Open final. A lot of American flag energy happening with Shelton, Tien, teasing Brandon Nakashima, who I'm going to speak about later in the show. All of these guys made the semis, and it marked the first time three American men reached the same Masters 1000 semifinal round since Agassi, Lindell, and Washington. Apparently, Yvonne Lindell played for the U.S. that week, which I find interesting. I don't think I ever knew that. If it's wrong, somebody tell me. But back to Ben Shelton. I do think Ben is in such an interesting space of his career because he's still, I think, in the ascent period of his career. There's so much to gain, but if you look into the minutia, the last 6 months or so, if you will, there's three distinct big trophies in his trophy cabinet. He's literally won three titles on the ATP tour, but they've all been at a rung of success and popularity that has made it feel like his season is just a tad bit underwhelming because his Australian Open wasn't splendid. Like I think he was stopped at the quarterfinal or earlier. It wasn't, he wasn't in the final weekend, put it that way. And then French Open and Wimbledon, he wasn't even close. He really came up short in those two events where there was some opportunity to be had because he had won lead up tournaments on clay and grass coming into those tournaments. So if you're a big picture person and you only look at the slams to kind of gauge where a player is, you might be thinking Ben Shelton is, in a spot of trouble, I guess you could say. But I think this is the best he's looked all year, even with those three titles. Not dropping a set to get to the Canadian Open final is magnificent, considering that he was the guy that was kind of dropping sets all year, like in the best of five format at the slams and even in best of three. He was taking the long way home in a lot of his matches, and this week or 2 weeks, he's been very, very efficient. I do, though, cautiously root for Ben because, like, outside of him being a very electric, kind of bring you along for the journey and exciting lefty. I'm partial to lefties. He's an American. He has the bravado. I like the confidence in which he plays. I also do clearly see from, I guess this is the media or landscape media in me talking, how much pressure is actually going to be on him, especially at the US Open, considering a American man hasn't won the US Open or any Grand Slam since 2003. We talking 2+ decades since that has happened, and every single media outlet that is even remotely catering to an American audience or a North American audience knows that and is going to put that to him, and that aura is going to be around him, especially if he ends up winning Canada. And we'll talk more about the final specifically, but I just do cautiously worry about him because it just seems like until somebody actually breaks through that kind of glass ceiling of an American man winning a singles major, it's always going to feel, at least to me, like this big slog of expectation and pressure on their shoulders until one of them actually just breaks through the dam and allows it to happen. So it's not that I don't want to see Ben Shelton racking up the wins and playing great tennis, because I am all here for that, and he makes it look so interesting to kind of follow along. He does daredevil stuff and the big serve and the bravado, the biceps, the not afraid to take his shirt off or lick his tongue at the crowd, not at the crowd, but stick his tongue out, and just he has a nice blend of absolute competitive fire and also showmanship that I like. And maybe you get that in playing college tennis for the University of Florida, or it's just naturally in him. I'm not sure. But he has all of that. He does rub people the wrong way sometimes, but I'm not one of those people for the most part. He's good. I just, I'm cautious because I don't want to slide all of my casino chips on the Ben Shelton train. And something like what happened at the US Open last year, where he was playing well. He had come off of a great Canada title, the biggest of his career so far, and then injury kind of bit him in the third round or so of the US Open and really halted, the momentum he had. So I'm equally cautious and excited about Ben Shelton, but I guess for the sake of not being on the fence, I'm gonna go with excited and see where Ben Shelton can take this Canadian momentum, because this is, like I said, the best he's looked all season. I think even with those three titles across three different surfaces throughout the season, this is Ben Shelton's moment, I think, to keep the momentum going and ride it high. So he's a quarterfinalist and probably a name you already know. So there's Ben Shelton. Maybe a name you know less of that made the quarterfinals in Canada is Mr. Jakub Minchik. I mentioned him when I was speaking about Ben. Ben beat him, but Jakub Minchik has a pretty interesting, story of his own. Has a Miami 1000 title, is a top 20 player, really big serve himself, kind of under the radar, Eastern European, chill, relaxed energy. So he's not necessarily like box office yet, but I do love that he is a young guy in the mix. And he was born on July 5th, 2005, I think. So if he's a July baby, we're just cool people in general. I know we're past July, we're past my birthday shenanigans, but Jakob Minchik, if it is indeed true that you were born in July, then good on you, my guy. He reached his first Montreal quarterfinal by ending Botic van de Chansloop's surprise run in straight sets, and then he fell to Shelton in the quarterfinal 6-3, 6-1. I Like I said, I think he is genuinely a dangerous person to have into the mix going into the US Open. It's a name casual tennis fans should start kind of filing away in the weeks leading up going into Cincinnati. He's already won on North American hard courts in Miami last year. He can I think he can really do some damage. His forehand kind of and this is kind of a trend. I'll go into another player I have to talk of that made the quarterfinals. His forehand is a little dicey. I've heard Jim Courier throughout the French Open, if I recall, talk about how his forehand technically leaves just a little bit to be desired, especially if it gets low. The ball gets low, like kind of knee level, and he's already a tall guy, so that's not necessarily the hardest thing to do in theory. So if you can kind of keep the ball low on him, his forehand can lack a lot of directional pace and control, but his backhand is super solid and he dictates off of the first strike with his serve. So Jakub Minchik is somebody that you kind of want to, just keep an eye on, especially in a landscape that may or may not have Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner at the U.S. Open. More on that to come. But Jakub Minchik is indeed a Canadian Open quarterfinalist and somebody you should keep on your radar, as well as Leonard Tien, the number 12 seed, born in December of 2006. He became the youngest American man to reach the Montreal quarterfinal since Andy Roddick in 2002. And he beat Daniel Merida, who we'll talk about in a second, in the round before that. He beat Merida 6-3, 6-2 to reach that Masters 1000 semifinal before ultimately losing to Shelton. Leonard Tien is such a fun package, I think, on the men's tour because he's almost unassuming. Like I could totally see if you were walking around the grounds of a tennis tournament or the mall or hell anywhere, and you walk past Leonard Tien, he doesn't really have, to me, the kind of aura that just kind of flows off of a high level athlete. If that makes any sense, Leonard Tien isn't quite there. But if you put your eyes on him and watch him play tennis, you're like, okay, I get it. Like he puts the ball wherever he wants to when he plays well. He has the lefty spin and lefty angle. He is fit as a fiddle and doesn't mind being out there for as long as he can to either extend the point or extend the match. He just kind of has that scrappy, old school Michael Chang, like I'm gonna do the best I can with what I have. Maybe my physical gifts are not through the ceiling, but I am going to outwork you and outmaneuver you on this tennis court. And I really, really like that about Leonard Tien. It's like sneaky good. And I don't mind a sneaky good guy that like falls in the category of if you know, you know, you know? So hopefully, more people kind of engage with Leonard Tien. I think on my last episode, I made a remark about how he has the wonderful bowl cut and then a middle part to go with it, and it kind of always falls perfectly coiffed on his forehead. I enjoy that about Leonard Tien. He just seems like a cool guy. So Leonard Tien, although you didn't win this Canadian Open, I think there's one in the future for you and a Masters 1000. I think there's something to be said about all of these young guys born in the early 2000s that are kind of coming to terms with just how good they are and how good they can be in the landscape of men's professional tennis. So a maiden Masters 1000 semi at 19. Mr. Leonard Tien, I think he's 20, make 19, 20, something like that. I got to get my facts together before I hop on these shows sometimes. But sometimes it's just like shooting the shit with you guys and talking about what's going on. So sometimes it's not that serious. But yeah, Leonard Tien is the guy to watch. He's one of my favorites out of this 8 that made the quarterfinalist. He's the one I actually wanted to take the title, I think, just to kind of make that official splash. And he's dangerously close to the top 10. I think if he had won the tournament, his career high would have been like 11 based off of projected rankings. So he's not far from making a top 10 breakthrough. You never know what might happen at the US Open or Cincinnati next week. So Mr. Leonard Tien, tapping my cap to you. Now, this is somebody who I don't think even the casual tennis fans are super hip to, and I'm speaking of Mr. Daniel Merida of Spain, born in September of 2004. A couple episodes back, or maybe the last episode, I mentioned like this mini clay court swing that happens post Wimbledon that usually gets on my nerves because of like, why are we back on clay? But I said that if any of the winners from those tournaments became relevant, I would definitely speak about how they've gotten their momentum tennis-wise on the court to be relevant now, right? Daniel Merida is one of them. He won the 250 in Umag, Croatia, just a week or so after Wimbledon, and now he made his first Masters 1000 quarterfinal in Canada. He is kind of finding his footing on hard courts. Clay court seems to be where he's like the natural, like he's from Spain, so it's not shocking that he may be more natural on clay court either at this point in his career or maybe throughout his whole career. He's young, so there's a whole bunch to kind of do. But I enjoy him. I enjoy him and his eyebrows, for that matter. A lot of people have pointed out that he looks like not old school, but a throwback, fresh on the scene, Marin Cilic, who's a former U.S. Open champion. If you put the side by side of Daniel Merida and Marin Cilic, you may see how they kind of have, same tribe-ish kind of features with the eyebrows and the facial structure. But Merida plays a good brand of tennis. It's a little unorthodox. If you watch his service production and like how he goes into his serve, it's a little wonky, not the most wonky I've ever seen, but he's a good watch. And there's something I realized, and again, this may have been a tactical thing, but when I watched Merida's 15 match highlights, I'm aware that 15-minute match highlights don't tell the entirety of the story, but he does something with his forehand that I think is going to keep him like relevant as long as he's healthy and all that stuff, but maybe something he should work on, and that is going cross court with his shots, specifically his forehand. I'm a sucker for a up the line or down the line winner, and Merida consistently goes cross court. At least in the matches I saw, he goes consistently cross court as much as he can, which I think is like built-in rally tolerance and how you should teach it. But I think the best of the best know how to redirect and open up a point with a forehand or backhand down the line. And if I was in Daniel Merida's camp, I would be like, you know what? Let's try to go down the line when we can. Like extending a point and killing somebody's legs is great. But if you have the ability to go down the line, which I feel like he did in some of the points that I watched him play, and he didn't, if you can kind of do that, he may be cooking with grease, like we say here in Louisiana. He may be cooking with grease. Somebody that's actually not afraid to go down the line and up the line and just break a point open is his Spanish compatriot, Rafael Hodar, number 20 seed, 19 years old, born in 2006. He has been the breakout story, I think, of the spring going into the summer. He had a great clay court season, making quarterfinals of Madrid and quarterfinals of Rome and the quarterfinals of Roland Garros. So his clay court season was spectacular for this to be his very first season on the ATP tour. Like he was ranked in the 500s this time last year, and now he's on the precipice of the top 10. He beat number 11 seed Lorenzo Musetti. He beat number 8 seed Leary Lehechka and number 18 seed Arthur Fies to reach his first Masters 1000 semi before ultimately falling to Brandon Nakashima in a very tight 2-hour and 4-minute semifinal. And this comes right off of the stretch where he was into the Mubadala City, not even Mubadala City anymore. It's just the DC Open by Mubadala the week before, where he took Taylor Fritz. He lost to Taylor Fritz in the final. So I think this is. I've said this, and this might be a little repetitive, but this is a name I think you need to have in your group chat, Rafael Hodar. Like he doesn't have the vibe, injuries aside, he doesn't have the vibe that he is going anywhere. He is kind of head down, doing his work while also being quite explosive in his play, especially off that forehand and the backhand and the return of serve. His return of serve for a young guy, where it kind of feels like sometimes returning serve takes a while, especially when you're receiving big serves on the ATP tour. His return of serve is already incredible for a young guy. And his name being Raphael doesn't hurt either. Raphael Hodar. He also has this he has this growing contention of people on the internet I've seen. I peruse the Twitter and threads and streets of social media tennis commentary, right? Providing my own. But I've seen people really go into the route that Rafa Hodar may fall into, like a villain jerky kind of guy on the ATP tour. It's too early to tell, but I've seen some people kind of just nail him and be like, nope, I'm not rooting for him, which I'm not there yet. He has had like some instant at the French Open where he kind of like inconclusively pushed the ball girl, but it wasn't fair to say that he actually pushed them. Look into that on your own time. I don't think it was that deep, but some people have taken note of him interacting with ball boys and ball girls, and kind of pinning him to be the villain, which I think is fine. Tennis is such a interesting sport away from all of the other like team sports, where it kind of feels like you're making harsh judgments on somebody's character just by analyzing what they do on a tennis court, when in actuality we're just talking about the damn sport. Sometimes it's not that deep, and with it not being that deep, sometimes it's fine to have somebody who is a little bit less clean around the edges and perfectly doing all the right thing all the time, like tennis would present itself to want. And Rafael Hodar might be that. Again, it's super early in his career to tell, but if he's the villain, oh well. I may come on a mic one day and rebuff all of that and have a difference of opinion. But today, in August of 2026, Hodar, do your big one, sir. Do your big one. I'm like sweating in here. Why is it so hot all of a sudden? Jeez. Okay, you know why it's hot? I think because next in my agenda is Arthur Feast. And respectfully, Arthur Feast is a hot ass human. For him, respectfully, like he's not even 23 yet. Like I'm not running down to knock on Arthur Feast's door respectfully, but objectively, I feel like most people would say he is a hot human. Uh, he made the quarterfinals as well, losing to Rafael Hodar, and his 2026 season has been interesting because like it didn't start off super great in January and February with him dealing with some like extenuating injuries. And then he had such a great clay season, semis of Madrid, he won the Barcelona 500, but then he had to pull out of Roland Garros and Wimbledon. So like his injury in that like back torso area, which I think may have been a stress fracture or something along those lines, is worrisome. And he didn't win the whole title here, but I saw enough from Arthur Feast that makes me again feel like I'm not moving from the Arthur Feast camp of it all. Some people I feel like are quickly putting him in like though he's just going to be perpetually injured camp, and I pray that he's not a perpetually injured tennis player. There are signs that he might be, but my God, when Arthur Feast is playing freely and confidently, it is something to watch. With cornrows or a fro or a fade, Arthur Feast is definitely a fine watch in tennis, and not even just for the aesthetics. His actual tennis can make your jaw drop, not just his face and body. And Arthur Feast, I think, is making his way through the ATP tour nicely. The only thing is, and I've said this on different episodes before, we need to see how it translates to a Grand Slam level tournament. That's what I feel like he's missing. Not necessarily going from like 0 to 100 and lifting a trophy, which I think would be great, right? Like you would never take away winning the US Open if he could this year. However, he's missing at least a quarterfinal or a semi on his resume. And I think that's the kind of stuff he needs to start building towards for people to start really believing in the feast freight train of it all. Because I think it's there. I don't think Yannick Sinner or Carlos Alcaraz or Alexander Zverev or Novak Djokovic will ever take the court lightly against Arthur Fils, playing well. And I think he fancies himself on the ATP tour. He kind of has that confidence in himself too. I just think he's missing the continued confidence in his body. If he gets that physicality correct and kind of figures out what he needs to do to prep for matches and cool down and do the whole bit, which is hard because in tennis, like no other sport, your body is the tool. There's nobody to pass up a ball to at all. If he can figure out how to balance all of it, the showmanship, the aggression, the explosiveness with which he plays, and how to actually remain healthy, I mean, sky's the limit for Arthur Fils. Sky's the limit. I'm partial, and I don't care. This is my show. I'm partial. Go Arthur Fils. Rooting for everybody black and of color on this show. Just saying. I don't know if that's ever been clear enough. We root for everybody black, brown, and in between those spectrums. Not that other people shouldn't be rooted for, because I appreciate them too, and I've talked about them on this damn show itself. I'm just saying I'm partial to the black and brown people. Somebody that's in the person of color category for sure as well is Mr. Brandon Nakashima. Mr. Brandon Nakashima, I think this was his first ever Masters 1000 quarterfinal here as well. And it's his first ever Masters 1000 final for sure. He beat Rafael Hodar in the semis. It got really tight towards the bottom part of that semi, like kind of deep in the ninth inning kind of stuff, where he had match points in the final game. It was an over 10-minute game, multiple break points against him. Hodar wasn't ready to give up yet. And then Nakashima came up with some really brilliant serving and clutch play, I think, which really is a underrated Brandon Nakashima's ability to kind of be clutch. I know that he hasn't been pushed by the media brand of it all far in tennis as an American like he should be. And I don't think he minds that, but I think it's natural for him to kind of be behind the radar because he has such a great poker face and kind of just very even-keeled aura to him, similar to Leonard Tien, but Leonard Tien has a little bit more of a little natural spark, I think. But Brandon Nakashima is just the cool guy that you would not have minded passing or getting notes from before a test. He would be the guy that has a really great study guide that he created, and you'd be like, "Hey, Brandon, you mind if I take a look at that?" And he'd have no problem with it. That's the vibe Nakashima gives. Really good person, smart, well-rounded, and a good competitor, but you can't quite get a read on him. He has a great poker face, and he also is coming in with momentum because he went deep in DC as well. He beat Alex de Minaur and Jakub Minchik in DC before losing to Fritz. So Nakashima, if you're looking for a outside betting favorite to go deep at the US Open, Nakashima would be a strong bet, I think. Nakashima is playing good tennis. His game is almost like the inverse of great American male tennis players, because his forehand, I kind of teased this earlier, his forehand is not the strength. His double-handed backhand is definitely the strength. Serve and backhand for Nakashima is like butter, and the forehand can get a little wonky. Definitely if he's nervous, it can get a little powder puffy and easy to attack by his opponents. But this period in this tournament, it's holding up. So Nakashima, funny enough, is the oldest of these guys in the final 8. He was born in 2001 and just turned 25, mind you. So I like Nakashima. He also did good on grass. He got to the semis of Queen this year. So Nakashima is also trending in the right direction, and he will be taking on Ben Shelton for that trophy in Canada. The last guy of the final 8, sorry to end on a not a great note, but is Mr. Luciano Darderi. Deserves our respect. He was born in 2002. Definitely, insofar in his career, is more of a clay courter. He's originally from Argentina, but plays under the Italian flag. Great season. Semis of Rome. I think he's top 25 or has reached there in his career. Great baseline game. He does this really cool thing after tight wins. And I think, if I remember correctly from watching French Open or French Open lead up coverage, when he made the semis of Rome, he has his grandmother's initials or something like that tattooed on his wrist. And when he finishes a match, he kind of takes off his wristband and does a little kiss to his wrist, which I find really endearing. If you've never noticed that, go check it out for yourself. But yeah, Luciano Dorderi also made the quarterfinals in Montreal, and yeah, good guy to follow, especially if you are a clay court head. Maybe it's not clay court season now, but you never know. Darderi might find himself in like a fourth round or quarterfinal of the U.S. Open. You know, you never. This U.S. Open, I think, is going to be a doozy, which some of them have really been over the past couple of years, and I think this one's gonna sit in that doozy field. And before I get out of Montreal and go to the women, just in, I guess, out of out of date tennis news, the Montreal final is between Ben Shelton and Brandon Nakashima. I think it starts at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know what that translates to local Montreal. Maybe it is Eastern time in Montreal. I don't know. I'm all over the place, just like tennis. I'm gonna have time to get back home and watch it, hopefully, or at least watch the highlights for sure. But I am more than I'm not indifferent. I'm definitely not indifferent. I'm in tune with this men's final. Ben being a back-to-back Canadian Open champion, I think is great. And then also Brandon Nakashima kind of, really having another breakthrough in his career, adding to his trophy cabinet with a 1000 is really cool. And I think it keeps the narrative going that Montreal is the space where you can kind of get your big trophy in, because the last 5 years has been men that have never won a Masters 1000 to lift the trophy in Montreal. 2022, it was Pablo Carreño Busta. You're probably like, where the hell has that name been? But he won his first Masters in Montreal. 2023, believe it or not, Yannick Sinner didn't have a Masters 1000 before 2023, and he won his first in Canada. 2024, Alexei Poprin, Loki came out of nowhere and won that title. And in 2025, that was Ben's first 1000 title. So yeah, rooting for both of them, and I think both of them are interesting storylines heading into U.S. Open. Not sure what they're going to do as far as scheduling in Cincinnati, because Cincinnati, as we record this, has started, which is so weird. But yeah, a match between Nakashima and Shelton, sign me up for that. All right, let's go into the women's quarterfinals in Canada, which were staged in Toronto. Was I as excited about this? Maybe, possibly. Maybe, possibly. There were some really, really established names in the quarterfinals, and let's go through them. Let's see. Let's start with. Should we start with Lana Rybakina? She has made the final, and she also survived a matchup against Ludmila Samsonova in the round of 16 to make that quarterfinal. She was all over the place. Her serve was all over the place, but she won. I don't know if it's coming out of my voice or not yet, but Rybakina is not my favorite to watch. I was just on a I was just doing a segment with James from the Unfiltered Tennis Podcast. I'm going to post that into the tennis internet ether somewhere soon, but we were kind of talking about video games, and this is just a teaser for our conversation. It was really fun. But we were talking about how in video games there's just like generic players put into the formula outside of the like big marquee names that sold the sports video game in the first place. And Rybakina would be like an example. Granted, I know she's a two-time Grand Slam champion and on the cusp of world number one potentially, but just by visual aesthetics of watching tennis, she would definitely fit in the mold of just generic drop into the video game tennis player. Big serve, strong ground strokes. What else? Respectfully. And she's into the Canadian Open final. Yay! Sorry. Don't have much more to add. Rybakina. Woo! Osaka made the quarterfinals and lost to Rybakina, so I was definitely bummed by that. Osaka did take out Leylah Fernandez to reach the quarterfinals and eventually lost to Elena Rybakina after winning the first set 6-4. She dropped the second 7-6 in the tiebreaker and then 6-4. She was leading by a set in 4-2, so that definitely stings, I think. And she is ultimately pulled out of Cincinnati, fighting fatigue. And I'm gonna try not to be so down on Naomi losing that. I think Naomi is in a position where, oh, I'm fighting two worlds in my mind, because there's a world in my mind that really wants to see and kind of needs to see Naomi win a WTA event, but also just trying to take it chunk by chunk with Naomi, because she's been on this comeback since 2024, since giving birth to her child. And there has definitely been moments of like, wow, like Naomi, you can still ball. You can still reach the highest of the highs. But there have also been moments where it's like, has the game moved on? Has her game hit a ceiling? Not a low ceiling, but just a ceiling amongst women's tennis. And I feel like that match against Rybakina may be a signal to that, because Rybakina did outserve her and outhit her from the ground. There were multiple moments where Naomi could have like grabbed that match and really took it home, but she didn't. And credit to Rybakina for serving big in big moments, in clutch moments. But Osaka just couldn't quite grab it. And I think that would have been a great win, especially considering that she just beat Sabalenka at Wimbledon. Like a win over Sabalenka at Wimbledon, a win over Rybakina at a Masters 1000 would have been great. But back to the drawing board, we go for Naomi Osaka. She's going into New York, a place where she's won twice, made the semis last year, and this isn't changing over here. Still rooting for Naomi. Fingers crossed for her. A little upset that she couldn't get that win over Rybakina, but we move. At least it was still a quarterfinal performance at a Masters 1000, which, the average girl on tour or average woman on tour would definitely take that. So Naomi Osaka, keep pushing. Also pushing and also being rooted for here at Tuned Into Tennis is Coco Gauff. She cruised into the quarterfinals, which was a little surprising because Coco Gauff's matches can be a little bit of a roller coaster, but she cruised, didn't drop a set until she got to the semi. A little bit of an asterisk in her run because she was supposed to face Belinda Bencic in the quarterfinals, and Bencic withdrew with a hip injury just mere moments before their match. And Coco eventually went down to Rybakina after winning the first set, 7-5. She lost set number 2 and set number 3, 6-2, 6-2. Watching that match in real time on television, Coco played well in spurts, and she didn't in other spurts. There were times where I was like, wow, her forehand is surprising me by how it is actually pushing back Elena Rybakina. Like, on paper, in a battle of forehands, you might give the edge to Rybakina, but in that match, in a lot of points I was keyed into, when Coco took big swings on her forehand and really put big RPMs and air underneath it, she was hanging tough with Rybakina. It's just that the other parts of her game, i.e. her serve, were kind of getting in her head and stopping her from that game plan. Like, I don't think there was necessarily a match of bad forehands, but it was unfortunately a match of shaky serves, because I know 1 second serve Coco hit, I literally bust out laughing, like, respectfully. And hopefully she has a little bit of a can see the bright side on it, but one of the second serves she hit was nowhere close to going in. Like, it probably hit like one of the side poles on the court. It was something. It's so funny how like niche moments in a tennis match can stand out for you and maybe not at all for somebody else. But yeah, Coco Gauff is still in the not the trenches with her serve, but she's still working through it. I don't know if it'll ever be a work in progress. A lot of tennis players have played their whole career with major parts of their game not being completely ironed out. It's just part of being an athlete, I think. But a run to the semis on hard court, backing up that run to the semis at Wimbledon. And, I think her game is still overall in a decent spot. I think it takes a really good performance and solid performance. Like, even Rybakina, like she said, Coco's a tough out. I had to serve well to get through that. And she did. it's going to take a tough performance to knock Coco out of the remaining hard court tournaments in Cincinnati and the U.S. Open. I still like her chances. We know she can win Cincinnati. We know she can win the U.S. Open. It's going to just be about kind of monitoring the things in her game that can go haywire. And her serve, unfortunately, can still go haywire. And the forehand sometimes can desert her. If she is kind of tuned into the footwork around that forehand and the timing and the repetition and kind of like pacing of how she goes up for her serve, I think she'll be okay, all things considered. I don't foresee her, knock on wood, taking any like, damn, you shouldn't have lost that on paper kind of matches. A loss to Rabakina, they hadn't played in over 4 years. Funny enough, the last time they played was in Canada. So, Rabakina, as much as I shaded her and shade her in general as being boring, she's the top player. So a loss to Rabakina shouldn't be too much snuff off the Coco Golf eyebrow, I guess. So, like I said, rooting for her. I don't think that loss revealed a ton, except what we already know, that the serve and forehand can kind of go wayward. So rooting for Coco Golf. Belinda Bencic, I mentioned, she made the quarters. She had to retire or withdraw, I should say, after having a hip injury. Belinda Bencic isn't like, how do I put this? Belinda Bencic is kind of aesthetically pleasing to watch. She takes the ball very early off the rise and can do one of my favorite things in tennis, which is redirect the ball. Like I said earlier in the show, I love when somebody can break open a cross court rally and go down the line. Benches can do that. It's just that me and Benches have had a very interesting like last couple of years as far as watchability. She's gotten into with Coco Golf on the court, and I haven't liked that. And she's made some remarks about Naomi Osaka when Naomi Osaka was very publicly going through, bouts of depression and taking a step away from what she felt like was triggering her anxiety and depression, which was press conferences. She made some remarks about Osaka just not, or Osaka doing things to kind of stay relevant or in the talk, as she put it. And on top of that, she was one of the first women to kind of have Alexander Zverev's back when the news of him going through domestic violence allegations hit the internet, very credible allegations. She was one of the first, like, oh, my brother would never do that, and implying that the women that came forward were only doing it for the money. I've had my ear to the door of Belinda Bencic and haven't quite enjoyed everything I've heard. Great tennis player, talented, natural, all that stuff. Just, I don't find myself rooting for her very organically or naturally, especially in a match against Coco Golf. Like, no way. But yeah, good tournament for her, I guess. Somebody I feel similarly about. Damn, we need some more WTA players that I feel more passionately impressed with and want to root for. Because this next one, Iga Swiatek, who, spoiler alert, I'm checking scores now. She won Canada, beating Rybakina in the final. Woo! Iga Swiatek is 101,000. Yay! Let's call your friends and start a party. I don't know. Like, I've said this on Threads. I have enjoyed watching Iga much more, like, struggle, for lack of a better term. I've enjoyed watching her trying to figure out where her tennis is, like, after it leaves her. I find that much more interesting than her just dominating everybody across the net. That's just how I look at it. Amazingly talented tennis player, splendiferous clay court player going into the Hall of Fame. I acknowledge all that stuff, but I also have the right to be like, take it or leave it, and I'm leaving it. Yeah, she won Canada, and that was her first final all year, her first title all year. So yeah, she deserves it, but it's not pushing me forward or getting me amped up in my seat. And a lot of what she does hasn't done that. So maybe it was a melatonin thing. I don't know. If you know, you know. But yeah, Iga made the quarterfinals and eventually went on to win Canada. What does it mean before the US Open? Sure, it adds her into the mix of potential champions, like 2 weeks ago, you would have been like, nah, Iga isn't winning the US Open. And here we are 2 weeks later. It is a possible real thing, especially considering that she's made a US Open final and won it back in 2022, So great player, just not my cup of tea. There's plenty of cups I do like. Iga's is not necessarily that one. Sorry to Iga fans that may come across this, but I feel like at this point in the realm of things, Iga is not necessarily uh, the paint color I wish to choose. Where's my stuff at? There we go. Okay. Other Canadian Open quarterfinalists on the women's side, Diana Schneider. She meekly lost to Iga Swiatek. I watched that match and it wasn't a great performance, but the matches leading up were great. She took out Jessica Pegula 6-3, 6-3 to reach the quarterfinals, avenging a loss to Pegula in the DC semifinal. So Diana Schneider is great, and I also think I say this all the time. I think about Diana Schneider, the babushka, like the head wrap that she wears, is so dope. And I think it's cool that Yonex, the apparel line and also racket provider, big brand on the ATP and WTA tour, has fallen in line with her wearing a do-rag slash babushka, because I had never seen the kind of like head wrap accessory from Yonex that they apparently have and make until they signed Diana Schneider. So that's good looking. Diana Schneider with a staple kind of moment on the tour. And I've said it before on this show, I'm partial to lefties. Schneider's a lefty. She plays with some grit. If you're looking for some grit, don't go back and watch the highlights of her match against Iga Swiatek, but go back and watch the highlights against her match against Jessica Pegula. Those were kind of like night and day matches. And she's, going to be a tough out in pretty much any tournament she plays. So there's that. Also a tough out, Elena Svitolina. She made the semis, lost to Iga. Goes Svitolina, arguably having her best year on tour, I guess. Svitolina has always been like a character in the story. Like, I'm fully aware that she's in the story, but no main character energy, if that makes any sense. Like, respect the hustle, goes out there, gives it her all, plays great tennis, but I'm not moved. If any, I'm not. I'm like, what's one rung below indifferent? Like, not liking. Yeah, not a big fan. Not a super. And it has nothing to do with her affiliation with her country and all of the drama that's going on with that politically. This has been a feeling I've had since before any of that started. Sorry, you like certain tennis players, you don't like others. And then there's Ekaterina Alexandrova, who beat Arina Sabalenka to make the quarterfinals. She is the last of she was the last of the top 8 women that I'm talking about here. She's not had a great season. Her 2025 was much greater than her 2026. But I think she has found some momentum here. She's a very streaky player, Alexandrova. She doesn't play with a whole bunch of margin. She's either playing well or she's not playing well. And she typically plays well in like the WTA 500 and the WTA 1000s, but hardly ever in a Grand Slam. So if you're like, who is that? Who is Alexandrova? I'm sure tennis fans know who she is, but casual fans, good luck if you don't know her. You're probably never going to see her in a Grand Slam quarterfinal or semi. That's just how her career has shaped out. But yeah, she was in the quarterfinals in Canada. This was my next little segment here, shifting to the Toronto final. I already teased it, but I already said it. Iga Swiatek beat Rybaka. I don't know what else you want me to say about that. I'm not in the mood to kind of like, if I had a guest, maybe I would be like, very, what does this mean? And open to banter, which normally I am, but sorry, Iga. Congrats on the win. Like, Rybakina, congrats on making the final. Oh, I do want to say Rybakina, I mentioned this at the very top. I can't go too far without mentioning this. Rybakina is in the watch to be the world number 1 numerically. She won the Australian Open this year, and I think she won the Stuttgart 500. Those are a big chunk of points, and obviously this final in Canada. She's going to leave, I think, Canada within a mere touch of ranking points of Arina Sabalenka. So it's really going to depend on how Arina Sabalenka does in Cincinnati and the US Open to see, when we leave New York, is Elena Rybakina going to be world number 1? I'm not rooting for that. I think that's like great tennis. I'm not going into it. Whatever. Whatever. That's where she is. That's women's tennis is. Rybakina is closing in on world number 1. It's up to Sabalenka to, I guess, stop her, I guess. All right, so there's a quick run through of Canada and my complaints of it, I guess. The complaining continues because we are into the next 1000 in Cincinnati. more accurately, Mason, Ohio. If you follow me on socials, I've already put my foot in my mouth and said that I don't understand how Mason, Ohio, of all places, gets such a highly touted Masters event. I'm sure it is a wonderful city to just plainly exist in. Nothing against the people of Ohio or people in the Midwest in general. I do think Midwest tennis should happen. Similar to what I said on Twitter, I think it's funny when you start naming the cities that major tennis tournaments are in. We're talking New York, Paris, London, Melbourne, Rome, Madrid, Toronto, Montreal, Washington, D.C., Palm Springs, California, Miami, Florida, Mason, Ohio. It's kind of just like, how did we get here? That's just my take on it. It has produced great matches. It just always feels like a plop on the schedule. And I know, again, if you're like yelling into your speaker here now, like, Miles, shut up. I know they've poured money into the tournament as they rightfully should if they want to keep it. The event looks like shiny, sparkly, brand new with the upgrades they've made to it. Um, I just would not be mad, and I was not mad when they were in talks of moving it to Charlotte, North Carolina. That was at one point a couple of years ago directly on the table, and those investments that they made in bettering the arena and the stadium and the whole bit kind of got them staying in Cincinnati or Mason, Ohio. So kudos to them. I also don't really love the way it looks on television. Some of the viewing angles in past years have been tough to watch, and the ball has been hard to see. Which literally, I kid you not, before I started recording this, my friend Albert called me and was like, "Is this where we complain about not being able to see the tennis balls?" Shout out to Albert if you're listening to this. Hopefully he is. Like literally, I'm not making this up. Cincinnati can be a hard watch in certain times, especially if the sun is not shining right on that stadium court. But nonetheless, we are here in the schedule, the last big lead up before the US Open. Unfortunately, the forecast and some marquee names are kind of wreaking havoc. There's supposedly a whole week full of rain and thunderstorms in the Cincinnati, Mason, Ohio area. It's already postponed the completion of the qualifying rounds. There's like even flash flood warnings and lightning and stuff. It just has not looked great. And it may be one of those touch and go kind of weeks where players are getting on court, playing some games, and then it starts to rain again, which is tough on everybody. I know it's even tougher and toughest on the players, but as a fan watching, that's not fun either. And also not fun is the fact that Carlos Alcaraz, who was supposed to use this, tentatively as a return to the tennis court after dealing with a wrist injury, he has pulled out, as has his big rival, Yannick Sinner, has pulled out with the right knee injury. Yannick Sinner just won Wimbledon. I don't think it is. I'm tepid on if he actually has a real knee injury, or if just trying to find more shade before he goes into New York and has to deal with those brutal, hot and humid conditions. So we don't know. This is the same Yannick Sinner who retired at the Cincinnati final last year against Carlos Alcaraz, similar for like heat issues. Just his body does not hold up well. I know people are like, well, he's a redhead, he's a ginger, that happens. I understand that, but it's still the fact, him in hot conditions are not necessarily the best match made in heaven. And we won't be seeing him in Cincinnati this year, as well as Carlos Alcaraz. And I think the biggest bummer out of the news of both of them pulling out of Cincinnati is that we are likely not going to see them compete before the US Open. Odds are they're not going to take a wild card into the ATP 250 in Winston-Salem after Cincinnati. They're not going to do that. So they're either not going to play New York or they're going to come into New York very rusty. And we're not going to have any measuring stick to see how they're really playing on the US hard court. So that sucks. But it does open up a bunch of opportunity for the other guys. The 8 quarterfinalists I mentioned at the top of the show: Ben Shelton, Arthur Fils, Jakub Minchik, Rafael Hodar, Brandon Nakashima, Lerner Tien, all of those guys, if they still, want to put feet to the ground and get more matches in before the US Open, Alcaraz and Sinner not being in the mix is a great open opportunity for them. Even players that, a little bit older and are more experienced on tour, Felix Auger-Aliassime could use a good run. Daniel Medvedev could use a good run. Alex de Minaur, Taylor Fritz, like these are all names that could definitely use the kind of breathing room that's provided when Alcaraz and Sinner are not in a draw. So I'm interested to see if we get a completely chaotic Cincinnati men's draw, which I'm completely fine with. I love that. We've had it before. I remember one year Borna Coric won Cincinnati, and Google where his ranking is now. Respectfully, no idea what's going on with him. It can be, just a name out of the hat sometimes. So we'll see if it's that kind of Cincinnati. And on the women's side, we'll see if the players like a Iga or a Bakana continue to want to play before the U.S. Open and go to Cincinnati, or if it's going to be time for somebody like Coco Gauff to shine, or if Amanda Anisimova gets it right because she's been struggling as of late, or if Jessica Pegula can, be steady Eddie and work her way to a Cincinnati title. There's definitely options. The only thing is it's going to take a while, I think, for like the story of Cincinnati to kind of unveil and move itself together because these extended Masters 1000 tournaments are interesting slash tough to follow in the first days. Because when as somebody that's been watching tennis for 20 years, I think one of the best part of a Masters 1000 when they were traditionally all in 1 week and started either on Sunday or Monday and ended that following Sunday with the championship, it was just you were kind of thrust into big action, a lot of top players playing on all the courts available, and you kind of were just like, kid in a candy store vibe. Do I want to watch this match, that match? All of my faves are playing. It's just like a tennis watcher's paradise. Whereas now since they've extended the events, they've kind of diluted those first couple of days. I mean, the first day of action on main court in Cincinnati on the stadium court was led by Jack Draper, who has been just downtrodden with injuries and eventually lost that match. But he was up first on stadium court at 11 a.m., followed by Ashlyn Kruger and Loish Beauchamp. Again, not really people I want to, respectfully, not people I'm rushing out in Cincinnati to get tickets for. That was followed by Diane Perry and Caroline Dolehide. Again, who and who. And then the night session is Gael Monfils, which we know he has the history of being able to light up a crowd and still shows, spurts of that. But this is last year on tour. So this is kind of just like a final ride for him. He plays a fellow wild card, Rinky Hijikata. That is literally a primetime 7 p.m. Thursday night match. Not exactly writing home kind of stuff. And respectfully, I put this out before I started recording. More power and very fair play to the players that actually provide entertainment to the people who have tickets, but that is not like leaping off the schedule the way most matches do at the beginning of a Masters 1000. Just go look at the 1000 tournament in Monte Carlo that was played back in April, for example. Go look at how the orders of play looked from the very beginning of the tournament. There is just a different energy altogether. And then the last match is Katie McNally versus McCartney Kessler. I'm sure there's a Team USA diehard that loves seeing American women compete in sports. And I personally do as well. Again, we're talking about like impact and energy and aura and beginning your tournament with a bang. That's not high up on the totem pole of entertaining tennis watches to put on the main stadium court. Would completely get if it was on court 4, court 7. Of course, let the diehard Katie McNally fans and McCartney Kessler fans go at it. They should be able to. But like kind of billing that whole round of names that I just mentioned as like the opening to your a marquee event, nah, pass. Respectfully pass. And also, to kind of wrap it up, the extending of those Masters 1000 is making players choose how many they actually want to play. Because take, for example, Ben Shelton and Brandon Nakashima, who are in the Canadian Open final. They only have a window of like max 24 to 48 hours to haul ass and get to Cincinnati and prepare for their next match after already playing deep into 2 weeks of the Canadian Open, Do you want to, if I'm a tennis player and trying to put myself in a position, do you want to get more matches in a best of three format, which say you win Cincinnati as well, that only puts you a week before the US Open begins? Realistically, where is your physical reserves going to be? Like if this was a video game, and you know how video games, when you keep taking hits, if you're playing a fighting game, it kind of shows at the top bar like your energy level or like your fatigue level. Tennis is a sport similar to that. Like it never really goes up unless you're starting a tournament from scratch or have taken time to get your energy back up in rehab. Match after match after match is great in some scenarios, but if you are really trying to peak at a slam, playing 4 weeks in a row is maybe not what the doctor ordered. And I think a lot of these players are realizing that and realizing that if I'm circling the US Open, which is where everybody circles, every tennis player in the top 100 wants to perform their best at a major, I may have to choose between one of these tournaments. Like it's either I'm going to start out the month playing in Canada or I'm going to end the month playing Cincinnati. But doing both when they're both 2 weeks and there's no other options to play tennis elsewhere, I'm going to have to choose. And I think that it sucks that the ATP did that in the last 2 years or so, and the WTA just went along with it because it affects both players. More time on court, more time in match mode and tournament mode, and it's not really giving tennis fans more to watch. You know, it hasn't really. I'm not the only person complaining about it. I know you've tuned into this podcast to listen to my colorful commentary / complaints, but I'm not the only person that's really connecting the dots to these extended masters, the lack of kind of excitement that's actually organically built, and the players coming up lame and more injured because of it. It's all happening, and these tournaments are taking the hit. So that's not great. But all in all, it's not like I say any of that. I'm going to like take a break from watching tennis because as soon as I get home, I'm going to put on the tennis channel. So I can say all of that and still watch tennis and love it very dearly. So this is where we are. Hopefully you've enjoyed my hour of yapping and ranting and providing commentary on where we are in tennis. The US Open is right around the corner. I don't even know if anybody that doesn't have tickets even has access to tickets these days. Those tickets are astronomical. But if you listen to this and are interested in going to the US Open or Cincinnati for that matter, go and enjoy some tennis. Be sure to follow Tuned Into Tennis on socials. Be sure to subscribe to this if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a great rating if you enjoy what you listen to on Apple or Spotify. And just keep engaging, man. This tennis thing moves every week of the year. Every day there's something to report, and I try to get on this mic and report as much as I can in about an hour or so. So I think I've rambled enough. It has been fun, guys. Let me know in the comments or in a DM, a message, email, a message in a bottle, who you think is going to win Cincinnati. Let me know your takes on Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz not being in Cincinnati. How much pushback should we be giving the ATP for continuing to extend these Masters 1000s? Just let me know. Come at me with all your tennis thoughts about this episode. I'd be happy to hear it. So that is all for today, folks. Take care, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.